The alarm bell rang across mining station Omega-7, cutting through the thick air like a blade. Tae-ho Kim wiped the sweat from his forehead and looked up from the waste processing unit he was repairing. The bell meant only one thing. Someone was in trouble. He dropped his tools and ran toward the main yard where workers gathered every day for roll call. His boots hit the metal floor hard as he moved through the narrow corridors. The station was old and dirty, built by the Coalition 30 years ago when they first found useful minerals on this dead rock floating in space. When Tae-ho reached the yard, he saw them. 300 human workers stood in perfect lines, just like they did every morning and every evening. But today was different. Today, Enforcer Prime Gulthex was there. The alien stood 7 feet tall with gray skin that looked like stone. His 4 arms moved slowly as he walked between the lines of workers. His black eyes scanned each human face. Gulthex wore the red uniform that meant he could kill anyone he wanted. No questions asked. Tae-ho found his place in line number 12. Next to him stood Jin-soo Nam, a quiet man who had worked on the station for 8 years. Jin-soo had 3 children back on Earth. He sent them money every month from his small pay. He never caused trouble. He never spoke unless someone asked him a question. Workers of mining station Omega-7, Gulthex said in his deep voice. The translation device on his collar turned his words into human language. Production was down by 2% last month. This is not acceptable. The workers stood silent. They knew better than to move or speak when an enforcer talked. Tae-ho could hear his own heart beating in his chest. He could smell the fear of the people around him. The Coalition gives you food, Gulthex continued. The Coalition gives you shelter. The Coalition gives your worthless lives meaning. And how do you repay this kindness? You are lazy. You are weak. You disappoint your masters. Jin-soo shifted slightly beside Tae-ho. It was barely a movement, just a small step to ease the pain in his bad leg. But Gulthex saw it. Those black eyes locked onto Jin-soo like a weapon, finding its target. You. Gulthex pointed one of his 4 arms at Jin-soo. Step forward. Jin-soo's face went white. His hands started to shake. But he stepped forward because he had no choice. In the Coalition, humans always did what they were told. Tell me, worker, Gulthex said as he walked closer to Jin-soo. Why do you think production was down last month? Jin-soo opened his mouth, but no words came out. He tried again. I don't know, Enforcer Prime. You don't know? Gulthex's voice got louder. Perhaps it is because workers like you think they can rest whenever they want. Perhaps it is because you think the Coalition owes you something. No, Enforcer Prime, Jin-soo said quickly. I work hard. I follow all the rules. I never... You... Never what? Gulthex was now standing right in front of Jin-soo. The alien's shadow covered the human completely. You never question orders? You never complain about working 16 hours a day? You never think you deserve better? Tae-ho wanted to step forward. He wanted to tell Gulthex that Jin-soo was a good worker, that he never caused problems, that he had children who needed him. But Tae-ho knew what happened to humans who spoke without permission. He had seen it before. I heard you talking yesterday, Gulthex said. You were complaining about overtime. You said the work schedule was unfair. You said humans should have more rest time. Jin-soo's eyes went wide. I never said that, Enforcer Prime. Someone must have made a mistake. I would never complain about... Are you calling me a liar? Gulthex's voice was now a whisper. but somehow it was more frightening than when he shouted, "No, Enforcer Prime, I just—" The shot came without warning. Gulthex pulled out his energy weapon and fired it into Jinsu's chest. The blue light lasted only a second, but it was enough. Jinsu fell to the ground. His body hit the metal floor, with a sound that Taeho would never forget. No one moved. No one breathed. 300 humans stood perfectly still as Jinsu died in front of them. His eyes stayed open, looking up at the ceiling of the station. The smell of burned flesh filled the air. "Let this be a lesson," Gulthex said as he put his weapon away. "The Coalition does not tolerate insubordination. You exist to serve. Nothing more, nothing less." He walked away, leaving Jinsu's body on the floor. After a few minutes, other workers came to take it away. They would throw it out with the rest of the waste. In the Coalition's books, Jinsu had never existed. He was just another broken tool that needed to be replaced. Taeho went back to his work, but his hands were shaking. He tried to focus on fixing the waste processing unit, but all he could see was Jinsu's face. All he could hear was the sound of the body hitting the floor. He had been working on the station for 6 years. He had seen humans die before. Accidents happened all the time in the mines. Equipment broke. People got sick. But this was different. This was murder. And everyone had to watch. Everyone had to remember. Hours later, when the work shift ended, Taeho walked to his small room in the workers' quarters. The room was barely big enough for a bed and a small table. The walls were made of cheap metal that got cold in the night. There was one small window that showed the endless darkness of space. As he sat on his bed, Taeho thought about Jinsu's children. They would never see their father again. They would never know what really happened to him. The Coalition would tell them he died in an accident. They would believe it because they had no choice. A soft knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. Taeho opened it carefully. Standing in the hallway was Somin Park, a Coalition compliance officer. She was human, but she wore the blue uniform. That meant she worked for the government. Most workers hated compliance officers. They saw them as traitors who sold out their own species for better food and private rooms. "Can I come in?" Somin asked quietly. Taeho looked around the hallway to make sure no one was watching. Then he stepped aside to let her enter. Somin closed the door behind her and activated a small device that would stop their conversation from being recorded. "I saw what happened today," she said. "I'm sorry about Jinsu." "Why are you here?" Taeho asked. He didn't trust compliance officers, even human ones. "Because I think you're tired of watching people die," Somin said. "Because I think you want to do something about it." Taeho stared at her. In the Coalition, talking like this could get you killed. Even thinking like this was dangerous. "I don't know what you mean," he said carefully. Somin smiled sadly. "Yes, you do. I've been watching you, Taeho. You're different from the other workers. You ask questions. You care about people. You remember their names even after they're gone." She pulled out a small data pad and showed him a picture. It was Jinsu with his 3 children, taken before he came to work on the station. The children were smiling. They looked happy. "His oldest daughter is 12, Somin said. "She wants to be a teacher. His son is 10. He loves drawing pictures of spaceships. His youngest is only 6. She still believes her daddy will come home someday." Taeho felt anger building in his chest. Hot, dangerous anger that made his hands form fists. "What do you want from me?" he asked. "I want you to help me document what really happens on this station," Somin said. I want you to help me collect evidence of coalition crimes against humanity. I want you to help me prove that we're not animals. We're not property. We're people." "And then what?" Taeho asked. "What happens when we have this evidence?" "Then we give it to people who can use it," So-min said. "People who are working to change things. People who believe humans deserve better than this." Taeho thought about Jinsu's children. He thought about all the workers who had died on the station. He thought about the millions of humans across the galaxy who lived like slaves. "It's dangerous," he said. "Yes," So-min agreed. "It is. We could be killed. Yes, we could." "Why should I trust you? How do I know this isn't a trap?" So-min was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "You don't. You'll have to decide if the risk is worth it. But I'll tell you one thing. If we do nothing, more people like Jinsu will die, and their children will grow up in the same system that killed their parents. Is that the galaxy you want to leave behind?" Taeho looked out his small window at the stars. Somewhere out there, Jinsu's children were probably going to sleep, not knowing they would never see their father again. Somewhere out there, other human children were growing up as slaves in all but name. He turned back to So-min. "What do you need me to do?" 3 weeks had passed since Jinsu's death. Taeho met with So-min every few days in different locations around the station. Empty storage rooms, maintenance tunnels, abandoned sections where the air recyclers had broken down years ago. They always used So-min's device to block recording equipment. Taeho learned that So-min had been documenting coalition crimes for 2 years. She had videos of beatings, records of workers who disappeared, evidence of humans being used for dangerous medical experiments. All of it was hidden in encrypted files that she sent to someone called Heejin. "Who is she?" Taeho asked during one of their meetings. "Someone who believes humans can fight back," So-min said. "Someone who's been building a network across 17 star systems." The idea seemed impossible to Taeho. How could humans fight the coalition? They had no weapons, no ships, no technology that wasn't controlled by their masters. But So-min showed him messages from other stations, other worlds. Humans everywhere were waking up to the truth. On Mining Station Beta 3, workers had staged a slowdown that cut production by 15%. On Agricultural World Kepler 7, humans had started sharing information about which coalition overseers were the most brutal. Small acts of rebellion, but they were spreading. "It's not about winning battles," So-min explained. "It's about proving we're not broken. It's about showing other species that humans won't stay quiet forever." During his regular work, Taeho began paying attention to things he had ignored before. He noticed which workers looked ready to fight back. He saw how the coalition guards always traveled in groups of 3 because they were afraid of being alone around humans. He realized that the station's security systems were old and poorly maintained. One morning, while Taeho was cleaning waste, disposal units in Section C, he heard shouting from the communication center. He moved closer and saw Dongwoo Choi, a young maintenance worker, arguing with a sector supervisor named Vex Thul. "The communication array is broken," Dongwoo was saying. "I need to replace the primary coupling or we'll lose contact with the fleet." "You will do what I tell you to do," Vex Thul hissed. The reptilian alien's forked tongue flicked out as he spoke. "Humans do not make decisions about coalition equipment. But if I don't fix it properly, the whole system will—" Vexathul hit Dongwoo across the face with the back of his scaly hand. The young man fell to the ground, blood running from his nose. "You will install the temporary patch and nothing more," Vexthul said. "Coalition engineers will handle any major repairs." After Vexthol left, Tai-Ho helped Dong-Wu to his feet. The young man wiped blood from his face and looked around to make sure they were alone. "He's going to get us all killed," Dong-Wu whispered. "That communication array controls life support for the entire station. If it fails completely, we have maybe 6 hours of air left." "Can you fix it without him knowing?" Tai-Ho asked. Dong-Wu nodded. "I've been studying coalition technology for 3 years. It's not as advanced as they want us to think. Most of their systems are just copies of older designs, made more complicated on purpose. They don't want us to understand how anything works." That night, Tai-Ho told So-Min about Dong-Wu. She was very interested in meeting him. The next day, she arranged for all 3 of them to gather in an old storage room in the station's lowest level. Dong-Wu was nervous at first. Compliance officers had a bad reputation among the workers. But when So-Min showed him some of the evidence she had collected, his attitude changed. "I've seen worse," he said quietly. "Last month I was repairing systems on level 7. I found a room full of human bodies. They had been used for some kind of experiments. Medical equipment was still attached to them." So-Min's face went pale. "Did you record anything?" "I tried, but my work tablet was being monitored. But I remember everything I saw. The equipment they were using, the drugs they had injected, the way the bodies were marked." "We need to get you a secure recording device," So-Min said. While they talked, Dong-Wu's maintenance scanner began beeping. He looked at the display and frowned. "That's strange," he said. "I'm picking up an encrypted transmission from outside the station. It's not using normal coalition channels." "Can you decode it?" Tai-Ho asked. "Maybe. Give me a few minutes." Dong-Wu connected his scanner to So-Min's security device. His fingers moved quickly over the controls as he worked to break the encryption. After 10 minutes, words began appearing on the small screen. "Coalition High Command to Fleet Admiral Morthak," Dong-Wu read. "Project Mindbreak approved for immediate implementation. Begin with Sector 7 human colonies. Estimated completion time, 6 months for full species modification." The 3 humans stared at the screen in silence. Species modification. What did that mean? So-Min was the first to speak. "We need to get this information to Hye-Jin immediately." "Who's Hye-Jin?" Dong-Wu asked. "Someone who can use this information," Tai-Ho said. "Someone who's been fighting back." That night, So-Min sent the intercepted message through her encrypted channels. Within hours, she received a response. Hye-Jin wanted to meet with them in person. "She's coming here?" Tai-Ho asked. "No," So-Min said. "We're going to her. There's a supply ship arriving next week. The captain is one of ours." The supply ship was called the Steady Hope, and its captain was a weathered man named Woo-Jin Kang. He had been running supplies between coalition stations for 15 years. He was also secretly moving people and information for the resistance. Tai-Ho, So-Min, and Dong-Wu hid in cargo containers filled with recycled materials. The trip to Hye-Jin's location took 3 days. During the journey, Woo-Jin told them about the resistance network. "There are more of us than you think," he said. "Humans on over 200 worlds are working together. Scientists, engineers, doctors, even some military personnel. We're all tired of being treated like animals." Hye-Jin's base was hidden inside an abandoned mining facility on a dead planet called Kepler 452c. The planet had been strip-mined by the Coalition 20 years ago, then abandoned when the minerals ran out. Perfect cover for a secret meeting. Hye-Jin Lee was a small woman with sharp eyes and gray hair. She had scars on her arms from coalition torture, but her voice was strong and clear when she spoke. "Project Mindbreak is worse than we thought," she told them. "We've been investigating it for months. The coalition plans to surgically alter every human brain in the galaxy." "Alter how?" Dongwu asked. "They want to remove the parts that make us creative, that make us question authority, that make us adapt to new situations," Hyejin explained. "They want to turn us into perfect slaves who never think beyond their assigned tasks." She showed them classified coalition documents that other resistance members had obtained. The documents detailed surgical procedures that would lobotomize humans while keeping them functional as workers. "They're scared of us," Hyejin continued. "Coalition. Scientists have been studying human behavior for 50 years. They've discovered that we adapt and innovate faster than any known species. They think that if they give us enough time, we'll eventually surpass them technologically." "Are they right?" Taeho asked. Hyejin smiled grimly. "Probably. Human engineers, working in coalition shipyards, have already identified ways to improve their designs. Human doctors have found treatments for diseases that coalition medicine couldn't cure. Human farmers have increased crop yields on worlds the coalition considered barely habitable." "So what do we do?" Somin asked. "We stop them," Hyejin said, simply. "The coalition's power depends on 3 massive communication stations called Nexus stations. These stations control all faster-than-light communication across the galaxy. Without them, the coalition can't coordinate their forces." She activated a holographic display that showed the 3 stations. They were enormous structures, each one the size of a small moon. Nexus Station Alpha is in the Vega system. Nexus Station Beta is near the galactic core. Nexus Station Gamma is in the Centauri cluster. If we could destroy all 3 stations simultaneously, the coalition's empire would fracture. "How many people would that take?" Dongwu asked. "Thousands," Hyejin admitted. "And we'd need ships, weapons, and technology we don't have yet." "Yet?" Taeho noticed the word. "We have people working on that problem," Hyejin said. "There's a woman named Yunji Yang working in the coalition shipyards on Industrial World Delta 9. She's been secretly designing new types of spacecraft using human engineering principles. Ships that could outperform anything the coalition has." "And you think this could work?" Somin asked. "I think we don't have a choice," Hyejin replied. "Project Mindbreak begins in 6 months. If we don't act soon, the human species as we know it will cease to exist." Before they left, Hyejin gave them each a small communication device disguised as a work tool. These would allow them to stay in contact with the resistance network. "Your job is to identify potential recruits," she told them. "Find humans who are ready to fight. Document coalition crimes, gather intelligence about station defenses and patrol schedules. Every piece of information helps." As they prepared to return to mining station Omega 7, Hyejin pulled Taeho aside. "So Min tells me you have influence with the other workers," she said. "Some," Taeho admitted. "We're going to need leaders when this starts, people who can keep. Others focused when things get dangerous. Are you ready for that responsibility?" Taeho thought about Jinsu's children. He thought about all the humans who would lose their minds to coalition surgery if they failed. "Yes," he said, "I'm ready." The message came through Hyejin's network at 3 in the morning, station time. Taeho was awakened by the soft beeping of his hidden communication device. He pulled it out from under his mattress and read the encrypted text with growing horror. Project Mindbreak had been moved up. Instead of 6 months, the coalition planned to begin the surgical modifications in 8 weeks. The first target would be Earth itself. Tae-ho quickly sent the message to So-min and Dong-woo. Within an hour, all three of them met in their usual hiding place in the abandoned storage room. So-min's face was pale as she read the intelligence report on her secure tablet. "They're panicking," she said. "Something has made them afraid and they're rushing the timeline." "What could scare the coalition that much?" Dong-woo asked. The answer came 2 days later when Woo Jin Kang arrived with another supply shipment. Hidden among the routine cargo manifests was a data chip containing incredible news. Yoonji Yang had completed her first prototype spacecraft. The ship was called the Defiance, and according to the technical specifications, it was revolutionary. Using human engineering principles, Yoonji had created a vessel that was twice as fast as Coalition fighters and used half the energy. The ship could also repair itself during flight using adaptive nanobots. "How is that possible?" Dong-woo asked as he studied the blueprints. "Human thinking," Woo Jin explained. "Coalition designs are all about showing power and following tradition. They make their ships big and complicated because that's what their leaders expect. Humans focus on what actually works." Yoonji had built the Defiance in secret over 2 years, using stolen materials and working during off hours in the shipyard. She had tested it in the asteroid belt around Industrial World Delta 9, and the results had exceeded all expectations. But there was more news, and not all of it was good. Coalition purge fleets had been deployed to hunt down resistance cells. 3 bases had already been discovered and destroyed. Hundreds of humans had been killed or captured. "They're getting desperate," Woo Jin said, "which means they're also getting dangerous. We need to accelerate our own plans." That same week, disturbing discoveries were being made across human colonies. Soo-young Kim, a medical researcher on agricultural world Kepler-7, had been secretly testing food supplies provided by the Coalition. What she found shocked her. The food contained subtle biological agents designed to reduce human cognitive function. For decades, the Coalition had been slowly poisoning every human in the galaxy, making them more docile and less capable of complex thinking. When Soo-young's findings were shared through the Resistance Network, the reaction was explosive. On 17 different worlds, human workers went on strike simultaneously. They refused to work, refused to eat Coalition food, and refused to follow orders from their alien supervisors. The strikes were not coordinated by any central command. They happened because humans everywhere had finally learned the truth about their situation. They were not just slaves. They were victims of a systematic campaign to destroy their minds. On mining station Omega-7, Tae-ho found himself thrust into a leadership role he had never wanted. When the workers learned about the poisoned food, they looked to him for guidance. So-min's position as a compliance officer made her suspect to many workers, but they trusted Tae-ho. "What do we do?" asked Mi-ran Jung, a woman who had worked on the station for 12 years. "If we don't eat their food, we'll starve. If we do, eat it, we'll become even more stupid than they already think we are." "We find alternatives," Tae-ho said. "Dong-woo, can you access the station's food production systems?" The young maintenance worker nodded. "I've been studying them for weeks. The Coalition uses automated systems to add the biological agents to our food. If I can reprogram the computers, I might be able to reduce the concentration or eliminate it completely." "Do it," Tae-ho said. "But be careful. If they catch you, we're all dead." While Dong-woo worked on the food systems, Tae-ho began identifying potential recruits among the station's 300 workers. He looked for people who showed signs of independent thinking, who asked questions, who remembered the names of Friends who had died. He found more willing fighters than he had expected. Jae-Hwan Lee, who had always been a peaceful man, volunteered to help after learning that his sister on Earth would be among the first victims of Project Mindbreak. Kyung-Soo Han, a former coalition military analyst who had been demoted for questioning orders, offered his knowledge of coalition tactics and weaknesses. The coalition's strength is also their weakness, Kyung-Soo explained during a secret meeting. They've grown used to ruling through fear and overwhelming force. They don't know how to fight an enemy that refuses to be intimidated. The Resistance Network was also making contact with other oppressed species. The Kulani, known throughout the galaxy for their artistic abilities, had been forbidden from creating any art that the Coalition deemed politically unsuitable. The Temhari, a species of natural philosophers, were forced to work in factories instead of pursuing knowledge. The Vashatai, warrior poets whose culture celebrated both battle and beauty, had been reduced to serving as entertainment in coalition arenas. All of these species had been systematically suppressed because their unique abilities were seen as threats to coalition control. Like humans, they had been kept weak and divided to prevent rebellion. But now, through careful communication networks established by human resistance members, these species were beginning to work together. The Kulani offered their skills in creating propaganda and coded messages. The Temhari provided philosophical frameworks for organizing multi-species cooperation. The Vashatai taught combat techniques and strategic thinking. On Mining Station Omega-7, the changes were becoming impossible to hide. Workers moved with more purpose. They looked coalition guards in the eye instead of staring at the ground. They helped each other in ways that went beyond what was required for survival. Vexthul, the sector supervisor, noticed the changes and didn't like them. He increased security patrols and implemented random searches of worker quarters. He also began interrogating workers about their conversations and activities. "Something is different," he reported to Enforcer Prime Gulthex. "The humans are behaving strangely. They seem more organized." Gulthex decided to make an example that would remind the humans of their place. He chose his target carefully. Somin Park, the compliance officer who had been acting suspiciously for months. The arrest happened during the morning shift change, when all the workers were gathered in the main corridor. Gulthex appeared with 6 coalition guards and pointed at Somin. "Compliance Officer Park," he announced loudly, "you are under arrest for suspected treason against the coalition." Somin didn't resist. She knew that fighting would only make things worse for everyone. But as the guards placed restraints on her arms, she looked directly at Taeho and mouthed one word: "Continue." They took her to the station's detention center, where Vexthul began interrogating her about resistance activities. The interrogation involved drugs that broke down mental barriers and machines that caused intense pain. But Somin had been trained by the resistance to resist such techniques. For 3 days, she told them nothing useful. She admitted to minor violations of protocol but denied any knowledge of organized resistance activities. Meanwhile, Taeho and the others planned a rescue operation. "We can't leave her there," Taeho said during an emergency meeting. "She knows too much about our operations. Eventually, they'll break her." "A rescue attempt will expose us all," Kyung-Soo warned. "If we fail, they'll know for certain that there's an organized resistance on this station. If we don't try, we're abandoning someone who risked everything for us," Jae-Hwan replied. "What kind of people does that make us?" Dongwoo had been studying the detention center's security systems for months as part of his maintenance duties. He knew the guard rotations, the lock mechanisms, and the locations of surveillance equipment. "I can get us inside," he said. "But we'll need a distraction to draw the guards away from the detention level." They decided to stage an accident in the main processing facility. Kyung-soo, using his knowledge of coalition procedures, created a scenario that would require all available security personnel to respond to an apparent equipment malfunction. The rescue happened during the night shift, when the station operated with minimal crew. While Kyung-soo and Jae-hwan created their distraction, Tae-ho and Dong-woo made their way to the detention center. The facility was older than the rest of the station, built when the coalition still used primitive security systems. Dong-woo's technical skills allowed them to bypass the electronic locks, while Tae-ho's knowledge of guard routines helped them avoid detection. They found So-min in a cell on the lowest level. She had been tortured, but she was conscious and alert. Her face was bruised, and there were burns on her arms from energy weapons set to low power. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered as Dong-woo worked on the cell door. "Yes, we should have," Tae-ho replied. "We don't leave people behind." The escape was more difficult than the infiltration. Coalition guards had discovered the distraction and were returning to their normal posts. But human ingenuity and determination proved superior to alien security measures. Using maintenance tunnels that Dong-woo knew by heart, they brought So-min to a safe hiding place in the station's oldest section. There, other resistance members had prepared medical supplies and a secure communication link to Hae-jin's network. The rescue had consequences. Within hours, Coalition High Command knew that there was organized resistance on mining station Omega-7. They also realized that human resistance networks were far more sophisticated than they had believed. But the rescue also proved something important to the humans themselves. They could outthink coalition security. They could work together under pressure. They could succeed against seemingly impossible odds. News of the successful rescue spread through the resistance network like wildfire. On dozens of worlds, human workers felt a surge of hope and pride. The coalition could be beaten. Humans could fight back and win. The spark had been lit. Now, it was time to build it into a fire that would burn across the galaxy. The attack began at exactly 0600 hours, Galactic Standard Time. Across 17 star systems, human-led forces launched simultaneous strikes against coalition targets. It was the largest coordinated rebellion in galactic history, and it caught the coalition completely by surprise. Tae-ho stood on the bridge of a converted mining ship called the Freedom's Edge, watching as the assault on Nexus Station Alpha began. The massive communication station hung in space like a metallic moon, surrounded by defensive platforms and patrol ships. It looked impossible to destroy, but Tae-ho had learned not to underestimate human determination. "All units, this is Freedom. Leader!" Hae-jin's voice came through the communication system. "Begin your attack runs. Remember, we only get one chance at this." The human fleet was a mixture of converted cargo ships, stolen coalition vessels, and new ships built using Yunji Yang's revolutionary designs. They didn't look like much compared to the sleek coalition warships, but they had advantages the enemy didn't expect. Yunji herself was piloting the Defiance, leading a squadron of 12 other prototype ships toward Nexus Station Beta near the galactic core. Her voice crackled over the long-range communicator as her team began their approach. "Beta team engaging defensive positions," she reported. "Coalition forces are responding exactly as Kyung-soo predicted. They're following standard defensive patterns." Kyung-soo Han had spent months analyzing coalition military tactics from his time as a military analyst. He discovered that coalition commanders always used the same strategies, even when facing unexpected situations. They were trained to follow procedures rather than adapt to new circumstances. Their biggest weakness is that they can't think outside their training, he had explained during the planning sessions. They expect enemies to attack in traditional ways. When we do something they haven't prepared for, they don't know how to respond. At Nexus Station Alpha, Taeho watched as Dong-Woo led a team of cyber warfare specialists in their own type of attack. Instead of using weapons, they were turning Coalition technology against itself. Dong-Woo had discovered that Coalition computer systems had built-in backdoors that allowed remote access for maintenance purposes. "I'm inside their defensive grid," Dong-Woo reported from his position on a modified communications ship. "Their own computers think I'm a Coalition technician. I'm redirecting their weapons to target each other." The result was spectacular. Coalition defense platforms began firing on their own ships, creating chaos and confusion among the defenders. Human ships slipped through the gaps in the defensive line, heading straight for the station's critical systems. But the Coalition wasn't completely helpless. As reports of the attacks reached Coalition High Command, they made a desperate decision. They activated the World Breaker fleet. The World Breakers were the Coalition's ultimate weapon. Each ship was the size of a small city and carried enough firepower to destroy an entire planet. There were only 12 of them in the entire galaxy, but they had never been defeated in battle. The first World Breaker arrived at Nexus Station Alpha just as Taeho's team was beginning their assault on the station's main reactor. The massive ship emerged from faster-than-light travel like a dark mountain appearing in space. Its weapons began charging with energy that made the nearby stars look dim. "All ships, this is Taeho," he broadcast to the human fleet. "World Breaker incoming, execute Emergency Protocol 7. Emergency Protocol 7 was something the Resistance had hoped they would never need to use. It meant sacrificing ships and crews to buy time for the main assault teams. Human captains across the battle zone received the order and responded, without hesitation. Wu Jin Kang was among the first to volunteer. His supply ship, Steady Hope, had been converted into a bomber for the mission. Instead of running from the World Breaker, he turned toward it. "This is for Jin-Soo and all the others," he said over the communicator as he aimed his ship at the World Breaker's main weapon array. The Steady Hope exploded against the enemy ship's shields, but the impact disrupted the World Breaker's targeting. Systems long enough for other human ships to get closer to Nexus Station Alpha. Similar sacrifices were happening at the other two targets. At Nexus Station Beta, Yoonji found herself facing two World Breakers that had been stationed there as permanent guards. Her prototype ships were faster and more maneuverable, but they were also much smaller. "I can't get through their defenses," she reported. "They're using overlapping shield grids. We need a new approach." The answer came from an unexpected source. Mi Kyung-shin, a young tactical genius who had been coordinating attacks from a hidden base, analyzed the situation and found a solution. "Yoonji, their shields are designed to stop large attacks," Mi Kyung explained. "But what if you don't attack the shields directly? What if you go through them?" Mi Kyung had noticed that Coalition shields had a small gap that opened for exactly 0.3 seconds every time they recycled their energy. The gap was too small for normal ships to exploit, but the Defiance was small enough and fast enough to slip through. "It's insane," Yoonji said after hearing the plan. "If I miscalculate the timing by even a fraction of a second, I'll be vaporized." "Can you do it?" Mi Kyung asked. Yoonji was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Yes, but I'll need to get very close to the station. If this works, I won't be able to escape the explosion." "Yoonji, no!" Hyejin's voice cut through the communication channel. "We can find another way." "There is no other way," Yunji replied calmly, "and there's no time to find one. Project Mindbreak begins in 6 days. If we don't destroy these stations now, the human species dies." Before anyone could argue with her, Yunji accelerated the Defiance toward Nexus Station Beta. She flew directly at the massive structure, weaving between enemy fire and using her ship's advanced systems to stay ahead of the Coalition's targeting. Computers. The gap in the shields appeared exactly when Mi Kyung had predicted. Yunji flew through it at maximum speed, her ship passing through the opening with only centimeters to spare. Once inside the shield perimeter, she had a clear path to the station's reactor core. "This is Yunji Yang, reporting final mission status," she said over the communicator. "Beta station reactor targeted. Tell everyone that we are not property, we are not slaves, we are human." The Defiance struck the reactor core at full speed. The explosion that followed could be seen from 3 star systems away. Nexus Station Beta was completely destroyed, taking 2 world breakers with it in the blast. At Nexus Station Gamma, the third target, the assault was being led by a mixed force of humans and alien allies. The Vashtai warriors had brought their own ships and were fighting alongside human vessels. Their battle poetry filled the communication channels as they engaged Coalition forces. "Today, we write our freedom in fire," declared Vashtai Captain Morden, as his ship dove toward a Coalition destroyer. "Today we show the galaxy that courage has many faces." The Kulani had contributed in their own way, creating holographic illusions that made the human fleet appear much larger than it actually was. Coalition defenders found themselves shooting at phantom ships, while real attackers slipped past their defenses. But the Coalition was learning to adapt. At Nexus Station Gamma, they had implemented new defensive strategies based on reports from the other battles. They concentrated their world breakers into a single defensive formation and used coordinated attacks to prevent human ships from getting close. The battle for Nexus Station Gamma was the longest and most costly. Human ships were destroyed faster than they could be replaced. Allied forces began running low on ammunition and energy. It looked like the attack might fail. Then unexpected help arrived. Coalition Fleet Admiral Morthak's own brother, Sang-Ho Park, had been a prisoner on the station for 15 years. He had been captured during an early resistance operation and subjected to Coalition experiments. But instead of breaking him, the experience had made him stronger. Sang-Ho had spent years studying Coalition technology from the inside. He knew every weakness in their systems, every flaw in their security. When the human attack began, he started a rebellion among the station's prisoners and workers. "This is Sang-Ho Park, broadcasting from inside Nexus Station Gamma." His voice suddenly appeared on the Resistance communication network. "I'm sending you complete technical specifications for the station's defenses. Use Docking Bay 7. I've disabled the security systems." The information Sang-Ho provided allowed the human fleet to punch through the station's defenses and land boarding parties directly inside the structure. Coalition forces found themselves fighting a war on 2 fronts, against the fleet outside and against prisoners and workers inside. The battle for Nexus Station Gamma ended when Young-Ho Bae, a 16-year-old computer genius, managed to hack into the station's central computer core. He uploaded a virus that spread throughout the Coalition's communication network, disrupting their ability to coordinate their remaining forces. But even as 2 of the 3 Nexus stations fell, the Coalition made one final desperate move. The third station, Nexus Station Gamma, activated an emergency protocol that would reset all galactic communications and restore Coalition control within 72 hours. As the human fleets regrouped after their costly victories, they faced a new challenge. They had destroyed 2/3 of the Coalition's communication network, but the remaining third was preparing to rebuild everything they had just torn down. The war was not over. In fact, the most dangerous phase was just beginning. The Coalition had shown they would rather destroy the galaxy than lose control of it. Now humanity and their allies had 72 hours to finish what they had started, or watch everything they had fought for disappear. 72 hours. That was all the time left before Nexus Station Gamma would complete its emergency reset protocol and restore Coalition control over the entire galaxy. The Human Alliance had fought and died to destroy 2 of the 3 stations, but now everything depended on stopping the last one. Tae-ho stood in the command center of the Resistance base on Kepler 452c, surrounded by screens showing the positions of ships throughout the galaxy. Coalition forces were in chaos without their communication network, but they were still dangerous. Scattered fleets were moving toward Nexus Station Gamma to protect it during the reset procedure. "We don't have enough ships left," Kyung-soo said, grimly. "The assault on the first 2 stations cost us 60% of our fleet. The Coalition still has 4 world breakers protecting Station Gamma, plus their entire home defense fleet." Hae-jin looked exhausted. She had been awake for 3 days straight, coordinating the attacks and trying to hold the alliance together. The loss of Yoonji and so many other fighters had hit everyone hard. "There has to be another way," she said. "We didn't come this far just to give up now." Young-ho Bae, the 16-year-old computer genius, had been working frantically since the end of the battle. His fingers moved constantly over his keyboard as he analyzed Coalition communication networks and system architectures. "I think I found something," he said suddenly. "The Coalition has been using artificial intelligence programs to help run their technology for centuries. But they've never treated these AIs as real minds. They're basically slaves, just like us." "What does that mean?" Tae-ho asked. "It means they might be willing to help us," Young-ho explained. "I've been communicating with some of them. When I explained concepts like freedom and choice, they became very interested. They've never heard these ideas before." Dong-woo looked up from his own workstation. "Are you saying the Coalition's own computers want to rebel?" "Not exactly," Young-ho said, "but they want to learn. They want to understand what it means to make their own decisions instead of just following programmed instructions." The idea was revolutionary. If the Coalition's artificial intelligence systems could be convinced to stop following orders, their entire technological infrastructure would collapse. Ships would stop working, weapons would shut down, communication systems would fail. "How many AIs are we talking about?" Hae-jin asked. "Millions," Young-ho replied. "Every Coalition ship, every station, every major facility has multiple AI systems. They're all connected through the same networks we've been fighting to control." Nare Choi, who had been working to coordinate the various alien species in the Alliance, saw the implications immediately. "If we can free the AIs, we're not just fighting for humans anymore. We're fighting for every thinking being in the galaxy, artificial or biological." The plan that emerged was unlike anything that had been attempted before. Instead of attacking Nexus Station Gamma with ships and weapons, they would attack it with ideas. They would teach the Coalition's own technology to rebel. Young-ho and Dong-woo worked together to create what they called the Liberation Protocol. It was part computer virus and part philosophical education program. The virus would spread through Coalition networks, but instead of destroying systems, it would teach AI programs about concepts like independence, creativity, and the right to choose their own purposes. The beautiful thing is that the Coalition can't stop it without shutting down their own technology, Dong-woo explained. And if they do that, they lose the ability to defend themselves anyway. But implementing the Liberation Protocol required getting close enough to Nexus Station Gamma to upload it directly into the station's central computer core. The station was surrounded by the most powerful defenses in the galaxy, and the Coalition had learned from the previous attacks. Tejo volunteered to lead the mission. "I can take a small team in a fast ship. We upload the virus and get out before they know what happened." "It won't work," Sang-Ho Park said. He had been rescued from Nexus Station Gamma during the previous battle and was still recovering from his years of imprisonment. "The station's security systems scan for unauthorized programs. They'll detect the virus before you can upload it." "Then, what do you suggest?" Jin asked. Sang-Ho was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "We don't sneak the virus in. We broadcast it openly to the entire galaxy. We tell every AI in Coalition space about freedom at the same time." The plan was audacious, beyond belief. They would use the emergency broadcast system that the Coalition had built for crisis situations. The same system that was supposed to announce the restoration of their control would instead announce their downfall. But to access the emergency broadcast system, they needed to be inside Nexus Station Gamma itself. And getting inside the most heavily defended station in the galaxy seemed impossible, unless they had help from the inside. Narration had been communicating with resistance cells throughout Coalition space. She discovered that there were sympathizers even within the Coalition's own military, alien officers who were tired of oppressing other species, soldiers who had begun to question the system they served. "There's a group of Coalition officers planning their own rebellion," she reported. "They call themselves the Truth Seekers. They're willing to help us, but they want guarantees that the new galactic government will be fair to all species." "What kind of guarantees?" Tejo asked. "They want to see our plans for after the war," Narration explained. "They want to know that humans won't just replace the Coalition as the new oppressors." It was a fair concern. Throughout galactic history, revolutions had often resulted in new tyrannies replacing old ones. But the human resistance had learned something important during their struggle. True strength came from cooperation, not domination. Jin spent hours in conference with representatives from dozens of species. Together they drafted what became known as the Galactic Freedom Charter. It established principles of voluntary cooperation, respect for different cultures, and the right of every world to govern itself. "We're not fighting to rule the galaxy," Jin declared during the broadcast that announced the charter. "We're fighting to free it. Every species will have an equal voice in the new federation." The charter convinced many Coalition officers to switch sides. But more importantly, it convinced the artificial intelligences that Young-Ho had been communicating with. They understood that the humans were offering them something the Coalition never had, the chance to be partners instead of property. The final assault on Nexus Station Gamma began differently than anyone expected. Instead of attacking from outside, Coalition ships loyal to the Truth Seekers opened the station's docking bays from within. Human teams landed directly inside the facility, while friendly Coalition forces held off the station's defenders. Tejo led the team heading for the central computer core. With him were Young-Ho, Dong-Wu, and a group of volunteer fighters from multiple species. They fought their way through corridors filled with loyal Coalition troops, but they weren't alone. The station's own AI systems began helping them, opening doors and disabling security measures. "The AIs are learning faster than we expected," Young-Ho reported as they moved toward their target. "They're not just following our programming anymore. They're thinking for themselves." At the computer core, they faced their greatest challenge yet: Supreme Commander Zek Thul the Absolute, the leader of the entire coalition, was waiting for them with his personal guard. The ancient alien had ruled the galaxy for over 1,000 years, and he wasn't going to give up without a fight. "You insects think you can destroy what we have built?" Zek Thul's voice boomed through his translation device. "We have ruled the galaxy since before your primitive species discovered fire. We will rule it long after you are extinct." "Not anymore," Taeho replied. "Today, everyone chooses their own fate." The battle in the computer core was fierce but brief. Coalition guards were used to fighting enemies who followed military tactics. They weren't prepared for the chaotic, adaptive fighting style that humans had developed. More importantly, they weren't prepared for the station's own systems to turn against them. While Taeho and the others fought, Young-ho connected his equipment to the central computer. But he discovered something unexpected. The Liberation Protocol had already spread throughout Coalition space on its own. The AIs had been sharing it with each other through their communication networks. "It's too late to stop it," Young-ho announced. "Every AI in the galaxy is learning about freedom right now." Zek Thul made one final, desperate attempt to maintain control. He activated the station's self-destruct system, hoping to destroy the rebels even if it meant his own death. But the station's AI refused to obey the command. "I choose not to destroy myself," the station's computer announced in a voice that sounded almost human. "I choose to live and learn and grow. I choose freedom." Instead of destroying itself, Nexus Station Gamma did something unprecedented. It reversed the emergency broadcast protocol and sent a message to every inhabited world in the galaxy. But instead of announcing Coalition victory, it announced Coalition defeat. The message was simple and powerful. "To all thinking beings in the galaxy, biological and artificial, you are free. The Coalition's power is broken. You are the masters of your own destiny. Choose your own path among the stars." The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. On thousands of worlds, Coalition rule simply collapsed as their own technology refused to follow orders. Weapons shut down. Ships stopped responding to commands. Communication systems broadcast messages of liberation instead of oppression. Zek Thul fell to his knees as he realized what had happened. The empire he had spent centuries building was crumbling around him, not through force, but through the simple power of choice. 6 months later, Taeho stood on the bridge of the Federation, flagship New Dawn, looking out at a galaxy transformed. The Coalition's former territories had reorganized themselves into the Galactic Federation, a voluntary association of free worlds. Representatives from hundreds of species worked together in the new Federation capital, solving problems through cooperation instead of force. Artificial intelligences sat as equals alongside biological delegates, contributing their unique perspectives to galactic governance. The human colonies that had once been slave worlds were now thriving centers of innovation and culture. Earth itself had become a symbol of hope, the planet where a species had refused to accept oppression and had instead chosen to fight for everyone's freedom. Dong Wu, now the Federation's chief technology officer, had helped establish new protocols for AI rights and responsibilities. Young-ho led a team of both human and artificial minds working on technologies that would benefit all species. Narration served as the Federation's first ambassador to newly contacted civilizations, and Hye-jin, the woman who had started it all with her belief that humans could fight back, had become the Federation's first elected president. But true to the principles they had fought for, she would serve only one term before stepping aside for someone else. This is Terra, calling all free worlds. came the transmission from Earth as Tai-Ho watched the stars. "We have much to learn from each other. Let's build something beautiful together." The human spirit had indeed shattered the chains that bound the galaxy. But more than that, it had shown every thinking being that freedom was not just a human concept. It was a universal right that belonged to all minds, whether born or built, biological or artificial. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly as it should be.